You look at a clock on the wall. It says 3:15. You believe it's 3:15. And in fact, it is 3:15. But the clock stopped exactly 12 hours ago. Do you know what time it is? This is the Gettier problem. A 2-page paper published in 1963 that demolished 2,400 years of philosophical consensus on the nature of knowledge. Since Plato, philosophers had believed that knowledge could be defined as justified true belief. JTB for short. To know something, you need 3 things. First, the belief must be true. You can't know something false. Second, you must actually believe it. Knowledge requires mental commitment. Third, you must be justified. You need good reasons, not just a lucky guess. This seemed airtight. If your belief is true, you believe it, and you have good reasons for it. Surely that's knowledge? In 1963, Edmund Gettier, a junior philosopher worried about tenure, published a 3-page paper titled, "Is Justified True Belief Knowledge?" Quote, his answer was no, and he proved it with 2 examples so simple they seemed almost unfair. Consider this. You and Smith are both applying for the same job. Your boss tells you Smith will get the job. You also notice Smith has 10 coins in his pocket. So you form the justified belief. The person who gets the job has 10 coins in their pocket. But here's the twist. You get the job, and by sheer coincidence, you also happen to have 10 coins in your pocket. Your belief was true. You believed it. You had good reasons. But did you know it? Gettier's cases share a common structure. You have a justified belief that leads you to a true conclusion. But the truth is reached by accident, not by your reasoning. The clock case captures this perfectly. You have excellent justification. You always trust that clock. Your belief is true. It really is 3:15. But you don't know, because your belief's truth is disconnected from your justification. Philosophers call this epistemic luck. Knowledge seems to require that your getting it right can't just be a matter of luck. Philosophy's response to Gettier has been to search for a 4th condition to add to justified true belief. The most natural response. No false lemmas. Knowledge requires that you didn't base your reasoning on any false beliefs. In the job case, you reasoned from the false belief that Smith would get the job. And that false step breaks the chain. But this response fails quickly. Imagine you look out the window and see what looks exactly like a sheep in the field. You believe there is a sheep in the field. In fact, there is a sheep, but it's hidden behind a rock. And what you saw was a dog that looked exactly like a sheep. You had no false lemma, but you still don't know. A more powerful response is reliabilism, developed by Alvin Goldman in the 1970s. The idea, what makes a belief count as knowledge, is not just having justification, but having arrived at the belief through a reliable process, one that tends to produce true beliefs. Looking at a working clock is a reliable process. Looking at a stopped clock is not. That's why one gives you knowledge and the other doesn't. Reliabilism has been enormously influential, but it faces its own puzzle. What makes a process reliable? Reliable in what circumstances? Over what range of cases? The details turn out to be surprisingly hard to specify. 2 related conditions have become influential: sensitivity and safety. A belief is sensitive if you wouldn't hold it were it false. If the world were different enough that your belief was wrong, you'd update accordingly. A belief is safe if in nearby possible worlds very similar to the actual world, you wouldn't hold that belief falsely. Your stopped clock belief is unsafe. In a world just slightly different, the same clock, the same glance, would yield a false belief. Safety captures something deep. Knowledge requires that getting it right wasn't an accident. You couldn't easily have been wrong in the same way. Another radical response. Maybe knowledge isn't a single thing at all. Contextualists argue that what counts as knowledge depends on the context in which the question is asked. In everyday life, you know what time it is from a normally reliable clock. In a philosophy seminar, the stopped clock scenario becomes relevant, and your epistemic standards rise. This explains why knowledge attributions shift so dramatically depending on context. But critics object. It seems to change the subject rather than answer it. When the philosopher says you don't know, and the layperson says you do, who's right? Contextualism says both, in different contexts, which feels like a dodge. After 60 years of post-Gettier epistemology, no definition has achieved consensus. Every proposed fourth condition faces counterexamples. This has led some philosophers to question the project itself. Perhaps knowledge is a natural kind, something that exists in the world independently of how we define it. Like water or gold, we might recognize it reliably without being able to define it precisely. Or perhaps knowledge is a cluster concept, a family of related but not identical things. We use know in different ways in different contexts, and there's no single essence to capture. Gettier's 3 pages didn't just critique a definition. They revealed something profound, that truth and justification can come apart in ways that feel like knowledge but aren't. We navigate the world by trusting our justified beliefs. But the Gettier problem reminds us that justification is no guarantee of truth. And truth reached by accident is something less than knowledge. 2,000 years of philosophy, refuted in 3 pages. That's the big questions.